We are finishing the book of Daniel. Somebody asked me the other day, "You're still on Daniel?" No. Well, there's 12 chapters. We did a couple of chapters. We did more than 1 week, but last occasion, last month, when we talked about Daniel chapter 11, and Daniel chapter 11, the last 6 or 7 verses in that chapter are about one man, the Antichrist. And so it means an opponent to the Messiah. He doesn't, but he's not only an opponent, he claims to be the Messiah, the real Antichrist. There are lots of Antichrists. And the Bible tells that this guy is going to reign for 1,260 days, which is 42 months, which is 3.5 years, right? So, and that's what we looked at last time, Daniel 11, 36 through 45. And that part focuses on the Antichrist. What is the Antichrist? John chapter 2 says, "Who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ?" So if somebody comes up and says, "Well, he's a good prophet, he was a nice teacher, we like Jesus, he teaches people to love each other," these kind of things. But if they deny that he is the chosen one who's going to reign, he is the Messiah, he's the God-man, then they're an Antichrist. They're against him by definition, who denies the Father and the Son. Peter said that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, "God revealed that to you." That's important. So 2 John chapter 1 says, "Many deceivers have gone out who do not acknowledge that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the Antichrist." By the way, that Jesus Christ came in the flesh, that's an important part of understanding who Jesus is. Because there are people saying that Jesus had a halo. You ever seen a picture of Jesus with a halo? He's kind of an extra apparition type thing. He's a maybe a ghost or a spirit or some kind of a. Jesus was born as a human baby. He had to get fed. He had to have his butt wiped. He's the God who made the universe. He was a baby. He had to go to school. He had to learn a language. He did all the things that you and I did because he became a human baby. And yet he did not have a human father. He was God's answer to our problem. And to understand Jesus, you also need to understand he really was a real living human being, and yet he was sinless, and he came and died. God can't die. He came and died for us, right? So that's an important part of understanding who Jesus is. Daniel chapter 9, we went through that some months ago, predicts a 490-year calendar for the Jews. And future events. The last part of the calendar is 7 years. In the middle of the 7 years, Daniel chapter 9 says, halfway through, in the middle of the 7, this man is going to come and he's going to desecrate the temple. He's going to produce the abomination that makes desolate. Makes desolate means the abomination isn't just something that's kind of, oh, that's a terrible abomination. The result of the abomination is going to desolate the world. It's going to ruin things. It's going to make things terrible, right? So let's kind of review where we go. 10 nations. The 10 nations, by the way, are called a dragon. There are several dragons in the book of Revelation. There's a dragon who's the great red dragon, who's Satan. And he sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven. He's Satan himself, right? There's a dragon that is the beast. The beast is also the beast. It's the empire, the 10 nations who get together. Sometimes when you read Revelation, he's talking about the beast, the empire. Sometimes it's the beast, the man, right? Sometimes it's the beast, its religious assistant. So there's 4 beasts. Sometimes you've got to distinguish between them. I think that in Revelation, when they talk about this beast that with 7 heads, that was slain and wounded and is healed from his wound, that is the empire that used to exist, which was Rome, that came back, and people are shocked when the Roman Empire returns. By the way, you think, why would God want to do that? Why would he say to his angels, which is Daniel chapter 11, and Daniel chapter 11 is, and Daniel chapter 10, the angel says, I'm here fighting these demons, these demon princes, so that we can bring about the sequence that God has predicted. Why would God do that? So his people who come to faith in him during the tribulation will recognize who this guy is. And they will not be deceived by him, because many people will be deceived by him. So this is what I think the green and red parts is going to be the future empire. It will include 3 Muslim nations, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. And they are part of the war that goes on, and that's the way I interpret it. So how does the tribulation start? It starts off not with a war. Somebody ever said to you, oh, there's a war going on, it must be the tribulation. No, the tribulation starts with a peace treaty. And when people say peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them. So people are saying, we finally fixed it. We finally fixed it. By the way, if you start a peace treaty and you don't have an army to back it up, the peace treaty isn't going to work. They made a peace treaty with Putin in 2014. And they didn't back it up with any teeth. And guess what he did? He started another war, right? So peace treaties are not, people say, well, we can all get together and we can all love each other and we all make this big deal. And if one guy in the mess says, oh, I'll take advantage of this one, the thing's going to fall apart. That's human nature. And the Antichrist is going to reign. He begins his reign halfway through. He isn't the guy, as far as I can tell in the Bible, he isn't the guy that starts the peace treaty. There's 10 nations that do it, but they get in trouble with the peace treaty because war breaks out. And he's the 11th nation that comes in, and they turn to him because he apparently has a military and they don't. And that's how he ends up seizing power. And what we know from Revelation, Daniel chapter 11, Daniel chapter 9, he comes from a Mediterranean tribe. It says the tribe of the prince who will come destroyed the temple. So some people think that means he comes from an Italian heritage, or maybe he's a Syrian heritage, because the Syrian troops were the ones that burned down the temple. His power comes from a place that trades by ship with all nations. Is that an interesting statement? In Revelation, we find out that the empire of the dragon, of the beast, is called Babylon the Great, and people trade with it. So he claims to be Messiah. He defends Israel against foreign troops, but he doesn't care about the Jewish people. He's a false Messiah. In Zechariah chapter 11, it says, behold, I will rise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for the perishing. He will devour flesh of the fat and tear off their hooves. His right arm will be withered and his right eye will be blind. This is the Antichrist who comes as a shepherd. He cares for he gives rewards to people who say, I'm the Christ. And there are Jews who turn to him and accept him as the Christ. But those Jews are not going to survive the tribulation. So he is a false Messiah. He comes in claiming, I'm Christ. And he demands rule, and he gets the power over the nations. In some amazing way, he can do great miracles because Satan is the one who empowers him. So this is in woe to the worthless shepherd. That's what the scripture talks about here. So in Daniel chapter 11, he claims to be God. This is his statement. I am God. He has words that he says, I'm Christ. He's a warrior. He breaks into fortresses. He fights the king of the Negev. He invades Egypt. He fights the king of the north. Finally, there's an attack from the north and the east that scares him. By the way, if you ever wonder, it says, is Trump going to get the mullahs out of Iran? In Ezekiel, Iran is one of the armies that comes from the east, that crosses the Euphrates and invades Israel at the end of the tribulation. So maybe God has a purpose for Trump to slow things down or whatever, I don't know. But in the end, the Iran is going to be part of the invading force that comes at the end of the tribulation. So he's not going to. That's my opinion. Right? I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying, what does the Bible say? Persia is going to be part of the invading forces. So nobody's going to make them into a Western nation that is democratic and loves freedom. Uh, so so now we're at Daniel chapter 12. This is the last chapter, and that's what we're trying to do today. Now at that season, now remember what's going on here. Daniel has this vision. He prayed for 3 weeks, asking for understanding about what all these visions that he'd had. He wanted to understand them. And finally, this angel shows up. The angel's face is like lightning. His eyes are like fire. His skin is like beryllium or something. It's bronze color, but you can see through it. He has a gold sash around his waist, and he's wearing a white linen clothing. And when Daniel saw him, he just passed out. He said, "Man, this is beyond." He scared him. And the angel said something really well. From the day you asked, I was sent to come and help you, but there was a war going on, and I've been delayed three weeks because there was a war with the prince of the king of Persia. Wow, what an interesting statement. And then I had to get Michael, the great prince of Israel, to come and help me. And now I got to go back and fight again with this guy. But later on, there's going to be a war with the prince of the king of the Greeks. So he's fighting to bring about the system that God has allowed to going to happen. In other words, he's going to allow Satan to bring about a sequence of empires that will result in Jesus being able to conquer the whole world and bring the system totally to an end. The Bible never says that when Jesus comes, it's the end of the world. The word world is a mistranslation in the Bible. It's not the world, it's the system of order. You understand that? The world starts growing and becoming peaceful and abundant, and green things growing, and people are prosperous and happy after Jesus arrives. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of the way the world works, the system of order, okay? I'd like to say it's the end of civilization. The way we think, the way we live, the way we act, our moneyed system, our taxes, our politicians, our science, our logic, our schools, everything, it's all going to be different. He's going to set up a different empire, okay? And he says, now at the season, Michael, the great prince, this is Michael, the prince of Israel, who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a season of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone written in the book, will be rescued. So this is the tribulation. The tribulation begins, and during that period, there's attacks against Israel, and Michael is fighting with it, and people are being saved. You think, well, during the tribulation, nobody's going to be saved. The Holy Spirit's gone. No, the Holy Spirit's still there. There are people being saved. God has written down names long ago. By the way, how does he know your name before you were born? Maybe it's the new name that you get. But he has a certain number of people that he's got names written down. He's got plans, and he's going to be saving Jews as well as Gentiles during this period. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to eon life, but the others to disgrace and shame and everlasting contempt. Now that's an interesting question, because we believe that when Jesus comes in the clouds, he doesn't come all the way to the earth. He comes up in the clouds. He blows the trumpet. People who trust Jesus as their Savior, who are really born again believers in this era, they will ascend and meet the Lord in the air, including dead people, right? The dead rise first, then those who are alive, we meet the Lord in the air. So that's a resurrection. There are other resurrections and it's somewhat difficult to understand exactly how they all work. There's Jews who are resurrected that lived during the millennial, and I'm not sure that we have the full answers of it, but we will not go through the tribulation. You understand that? That's a really important thing to understand. A lot of Christians don't understand that. and they get confused about these things. But if you are a real believer, you put your faith in Jesus, you're not going to be here then there's trouble because he's going to take you out. That's called the rapture, right? And that's important to understand. But some are going to be rising during this period. And now, whether it's all going to happen this period or sometimes a little later, we don't really know exactly. And there was war in the skies. Now, this is Revelation chapter 12. This is the story about this archangel, Michael. Michael and his angel waging war with the dragon. When's this going to happen? I think halfway through the tribulation, that Satan, the dragon, is thrown down to the ground. He is, right today, his kingdom is called the kingdom of the air, right? He's the prince of the power of the air. During the tribulation, he no longer flies around in the air. He's on the ground. If you look in Revelation, there are demons that are walking around, and they seem to be on the ground, right? They're called horses, you know? And they're horses that attack man, and they look like scorpions. There are different symbols that are given in that book. And the dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer any place for them in the skies. The word skies is not necessarily, we think of the heavens, we think heavens is God's heavens, but in the Bible, the word can be local skies, air skies, atmospheric skies, starry skies, or God's kingdom. And usually it's plural, usually it has to do with the local atmosphere. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called Satan and the devil, and his angels were thrown down with him, and they overcame him. Who overcame him? This is a really interesting passage. They overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb of the word of their testimony. There's people who are believers during this era. How did they become believers? I think they read the book of Revelation. They recognized the Antichrist, and they came to faith. There are millions of people who will come to faith. They're not coming to faith through the church. There's, it's a different system. People are being killed for their faith. And yet people are coming and putting their faith in Jesus during the tribulation. What happens to them? Satan tries to kill them. And even though they die, they keep their faith. They continue in the faith. And they overcome them because of their faith in Jesus. He's the Lamb who died for them. So there's salvation during the tribulation period. And the missionaries in the tribulation period are primarily Jewish missionaries. They're not the same as us, right? And the gospel message that they preach is a little bit different than our message. They don't just say Jesus came to die for you. They say Jesus came to die for you, and he's coming soon, right? Get ready, he's on his way. So the gospel message has an additional addendum to it at that period that says the kingdom is here. Get ready. Don't mess around with this evil spirit. Be prepared even to die because Jesus is coming soon. And he says, woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you with great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. So Jesus said, once I was watching Satan fall from heaven like lightning. He said that after he sent his disciples out to tell people about the kingdom of heaven is at hand, right? So those who have insight, this is back to Daniel, those who have insight will shine like the brightness of the spreader skies. The word spreader is really an interesting word. It's the same word used in the creation, that the skies are spreaders. And those who lead many to righteousness like the stars for an eon and beyond. So here the angel is telling Daniel, look, there's going to be resurrected people. There's going to be people who are going to suffer, but those who turn many to righteousness will shine. They will have glory in the new kingdom that God is going to bring. And but as for you, Daniel, conceal the words and seal up the book until the end of the age. So Daniel has been asking, hey, I want to understand this stuff. I really don't understand all these. And he says, well, the book is sealed, right? People will read it and they won't necessarily understand it. They'll say, yeah, do you think in our day today, we understand it better than anyone has ever understood it before? I think so, because we see things, we see the scenery being set, right? We see the scenery being set for the end of the age. Jesus hasn't come yet, but think of a stage. You put stuff on the stage, then you open the curtain, right? The stuff is being placed on the stage, but the curtain hasn't opened yet, right? The scene is being set up, and this is, I think, we see the very things that are predicted being prepared. The things in the Middle East, Israel returning to the land, this sort of things are part of the equation for the end. And he says, many will go back and forth and knowledge will increase. Now, here's two things that he says about the end of the age. How do we know we're in the end of the age, right? People 1,000 years ago, they thought maybe it was the end of the age back then. Jesus is coming on the year, when people got ready on the year 1,000, they said, oh, get ready, he's coming, right? In the year 1850 something, there were people that put on their white gowns and went and stood on top of the hill and said, Jesus is coming, right? They were all wrong, right? But what are the characteristics? Many will run back and forth. If you want to go to the Philippines, you go down and buy a ticket, you get on a plane, a few hours later, you're there, right? Has that ever happened before in the history of the world? There's ability for people to move, to go different places, to go rapidly, right? That's a characteristic of the end of the age. For many centuries, people they lived in their village. They moved a few miles here and there, right? And he says knowledge will increase. Another way of saying knowledge will increase will be the vain pursuit of knowledge. In other words, people are running after knowledge. Knowledge is one of those things that's really interesting. If you put a little bit of error in the truth, is the truth still there? Can't have truth. If you have even one little bit of error, corrupts the truth. The truth is something that is unique. There is no partial truth. There's no half. There's no, if you add, by the way, if you listen to people tell you the truth on the TV or on the internet, they will tell you partial truths, right? They will tell you a little bit of truth and a little bit of error, and they'll mix them all in together, and they'll say, this is the truth. Well, there's a little bit of truth over there, but it's not the truth. It's a vain pursuit of knowledge. People are not finding out new things. By the way, the AI agents lie just like everything else does, right? So don't buy the AI systems. Don't put your money into it. It's not going to last, right? So how do we know it's the end of the age? People are running back and forth. You can go anywhere, and knowledge is available. Trivial knowledge. You can find out all kinds of little things that don't mean anything, right? About the star or some, planet or some animal in the ocean. We find out a lot of things, really interesting things, but they don't find the truth. So knowledge will increase. By the way, data centers are multiplying, and trivial knowledge is just everywhere, but it's not the same as the truth. So here's an example. The Bible says, mocker seeks wisdom and finds none, but knowledge comes easily to the discerning. If you want the truth, you look in the Bible, you will find the truth. And the truth will make you free. It's not, and yet a lot of people read the Bible, people who know a lot more about the Bible than you and I read it, people who can read Greek backwards and forwards and everything else, and they'll read the Bible and they say, Jesus isn't the Christ, he didn't come, it isn't this, and they'll give all kinds of excuses. You know what? They can't find the truth. It's not available to them. It is available to those who are discerning and ask God to help them and give them wisdom. So think about this. In the universe today, if you pick up a book and it says, how much of the universe is visible? And most scientists will say, only 5% of the universe is visible. There are trillions of galaxies, they say, but we don't see most of the stuff out there. And all the stuff it's invisible. We can't measure it, we can't see it, but we mathematically figure it's there. You know what? You think God can make a fool out of those people? I submit to you he can, because they have certain assumptions that they don't look at. And so their invisible universe is going to come back and bite them, right? But So then Daniel says, I, Daniel, looked, and two others were standing, one on this bank of the river and one on the other bank of the river. So the man that's above the river's water is this man with this bright, shining face, looks like lightning. And he's the guy with this golden belt around his waist and his white linen robes. And now he sees two other guys, one on one side of the river and one on the other. And so maybe that's some artist's idea of what it might look like. Who knows? But and one said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long till the end of these wonders? So these beings are communicating with each other, and Daniel's just listening. And it's the question that Daniel wants to hear, right? And I heard the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, as he raised his right hand and his left hand toward the sky. So he puts both hands up. He's going to swear not just with his right hand, but his both hands. And he says, and towards the sky, and he swore by him who lives for eons and eons, that would be for a time, times, and a dividing of time, a season, a seasons, and half a season. In other words, this is the old statement in the Bible that we expect 42 months, 3.5 years. You know, this is, again, the way he says it. And as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these things will be completed. Now, notice something interesting here. You say, well, is God going to defend the Jews? He's going to defend some of the Jews, but he's not going to defend all the Jews. Some of the Jews who've kissed up to the Antichrist and said, yeah, he really is our Christ. He came to save us. And there are a number of Jews who do that. Their power is going to be shattered. So part of the tribulation is not just that I'm going to save the world for the Jews, but the Jews who are false and reject their real Messiah, they're not going to survive this situation. So their power is going to be shattered. By the way, Daniel chapter in Revelation, do you know there's a book in the Bible that twice promises you, even if you can't read, if you can only hear the words of this book, it will be a blessing to you. That's twice in the book of Revelation that it tells us that. So the book of Revelation is a book that if you read it, you're going to get a blessing. Should you be reading it? Some people say, well, it's too complicated. I don't understand it. Well, it can give you a blessing because you're going to know that God's got an answer to the final issues and he's going to establish his kingdom. So in Revelation chapter 6, Jesus has a scroll and he's breaking seals on the scroll. There's 7 seals. By the way, you have to break all 7 seals before you can unroll the scroll, right? But each seal represents something. It represents a year. We know that from Daniel chapter 9. And so think of it this way. 7 seals equals 7 years. 7 trumpets nest within the last year. So each one's about 52 days, right? The 7 bowls is 1/49th of the last year. So each one's just a little over a week. All right? Does that make sense? Let me show. Have you ever seen Russian dolls? You know, the Russian dolls, I think maybe the people in Russia in freezing cold winters, and maybe they had a knife and they carved a little piece of wood and they made these little dolls. And the dolls are hollow. So one sits inside the other, right? And maybe they painted the wood up and they made it. This is their tradition of their little dolls. So think of the Revelation, the calendar of the Revelation is like 3 Russian dolls. The big Russian doll is the years. When you get to the last year, you open it up, there's 7 trumpets, right? And when you get to the last trumpet, that becomes the 7 seals. So another way of thinking of it, think of a book with 7 chapters. The last chapter has 7 paragraphs. The last paragraph has 7 sentences. When does the book end? The book ends at the last chapter, the last paragraph, the last sentence. They all end together. You get that? They all end together. The tribulation, the Revelation all ends, boom, when all these things happen, right? So I think so it's the end of the book. By the way, let's do a real brief little run by the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation and Daniel, they fit together. They complement each other. The first, there's 4 horsemen. The horsemen are each one a year, right? What happens in the first year? Conquest. Who's conquering? The 10 nations are beginning to build their system and get their peace treaty in, and they're going to allow the Jews to build a temple and that sort of thing. What happens in the second year? War breaks out. What happens in the third year? Famine is there. What happens in the fourth year? Death, right? The fourth year is the middle of the tribulation. You say, how could it be the middle of the tribulation? 3.5 years. You think the first year starts from 0, goes to 1, right? The second year starts from 1 and goes to 2, right? So the fourth year starts from 3 and goes to 4, right? So 3.5 is in the fourth year. That's when the Antichrist sits in the temple, says, I'm Christ, and that's when the abomination begins, okay? So what happens in the fifth year? Those who were killed who wait for the real Jesus. So there's persecution. There's people are being killed. There are people who've come to faith in the tribulation. They're being killed for their faith. In the sixth year, an asteroid hits. Now that's my opinion. It says the sky split like a scroll. You know, if you had a scroll and you unroll it, an ancient scroll, an ancient book, and you let it go, whew, it's going to come back together, right? And that's what asteroids do when they come through the air. They come through the air, an asteroid comes through, he's coming real fast. He pushes the air out of the way, gets boiling hot, pieces of hot metal are flashing off of it, but the air can't climb in behind it fast enough. And then after he passes, the thing slaps back together, makes a huge boom, right? So that's my interpretation of what's going to happen. Every island will move, every mountain will move out of their place. That's in the sixth year. Then in the seventh year, a whole bunch of things start happening. Burning rocks fall, grass and trees burn on a third of the earth. A burning mountain hits the sea. A comet hits that poisons the waters on a third of the earth. Demons torture men. Demons drive human armies to Armageddon. That's kind of the last year. It's a pretty nasty situation. So here's the thing. Blessed is the one who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy and heed the things written in it, because the era is near. Is it near to us now, nearer than it was when John wrote this? Absolutely. Do we see things that are beginning to line up? I think we do. So what are we supposed to do? Are we going to form some kind of a political organization to prepare Jesus' coming? No, we're going to wait for him. Right? What does faith do? Faith says, I believe him, I wait for him. He's going to do it right. He's just, he's righteous, he's holy. He's not going to do evil. He's not going to rush to judgment, but in the end, he's going to bring about his kingdom. And he, the Antichrist, will prosper until the indignation, anger, rage is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. So the Antichrist is going to prosper during this 3.5 years. He's getting people to believe he's the Christ. He can bring fire fall down from heaven. He can do all kinds of miracles. Satan is empowering him, and he's angry, and also God is angry. In the end, God has to respond to what people are doing. And so the final asteroid hit happens at the end of the tribulation. The mountains disappear. They don't just move. Mountains turn into valleys. Islands run away. Every wall of every city falls down. You think this building is going to be standing? Don't get underneath it, because when these big asteroids hit, they move everything. And the sun darkens like sackcloth. The moon's like blood. By the way, in the last week or two, they've had a lot of fires in Europe and in many places. You look at the sun, and guess what color it is? It isn't that the sun changed color. It was the dust and the dirt between us and them that made it look red, right? And the moon looks like sackcloth, and all these things. These are predicted in the scripture for the end of the tribulation. And And a lot of it is just burning dust. When a third of the earth burns up, the forest and the grass burn, you can imagine that's an awful lot of dust in the air. Right? That's a So if you were a person who survives, and we're not going to worry about it, but if you were a person who survives the tribulation, and you believe Jesus, and you're all the way towards the end of the tribulation, maybe the best thing to do is have a nice wet cloth, put it over your face, and breathe through the wet cloth, because there's going to be a lot of debris and dust around. You say, well, why would God do that? Why would God do that? Think about all that dust, all that debris, all the dust and the ashes from this thing. They're going to rain down. They're going to seal our poisons in. Do you think we poison the earth? Do you think our PFOAs are in the ground? You know, you think God can fix this thing and make the world again green and prosperous? And can he get rid of our pollutions? Can we get rid of our pollutions? No, we can't do it. Can Jesus do it? Will the asteroid be part of it? I think maybe it will be. Right? So don't think of this as like the end of the world. This is the beginning of righteousness, of people who live without police, people without taxes, people who plant their fields and rejoice in God's goodness. All right. So when one of the mountains hits the sea, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and as a third of the ships were destroyed. This is a big deal. A big mountain hits the ocean. It's not like a little ripple wave. It's a big old wave that's hundreds of feet high, and it rolls over these ships out there. Right. So the mountains become valleys. Right. That's the end of the tribulation. In the days of those kings, this is Daniel chapter 2, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will shatter all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but will itself stand forever. Is that what you're looking for? Are you waiting for Jesus to come? Have you put your faith in him? If you put your faith in him, hang in there. We're not going to have to go through this tribulation. But he's got a plan, and his plan is righteous. It's just. He doesn't rush to judgment. He allows the enemy to do whatever they want to do so that they will be destroyed. Right? And so, as for me, I heard, but I could not understand. So here's Daniel. He's looking, and he says, man, this is pretty wild stuff. So I said, my Lord, what will be the outcome of these events? Go your way, Daniel, for the words are concealed and sealed into the era of the end. A lot of people haven't understood him. I think in our day we have better understanding about what's coming than anyone has ever understood before. But in those days, they didn't know. Daniel didn't understand. Again, what's the end of? The end of what? The end not of the world, the end of the system of order, the end of the way the world is organized, the way the governments work, the way technology works, the way everything works. It's going to be a different world, and it's going to be a place of peace and justice, and many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. So during the tribulation, there are going to be people who come to faith in Christ and will come to understand what's happening, but the wicked will never understand. So, from when the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. You say 1,290 days? Why 1,290? I thought we had 1,260 days. So 1,260 divided by 30 is 42 months. 1,290 divided by 30 is 43 months. What's the extra month for? Well, he doesn't tell us, but I'll give you my guess, all right? If all that dust and debris and ashes and stuff is floating around in the air, people are going to be hunkered down for at least a month. Right? They're not going to be running around planting their gardens. You know, they're going to be laying low, trying to stay in a shelter somewhere and find a place to some water to drink, some clean air to breathe. You know, it's going to be tough. It doesn't, Jesus comes all of a sudden, everything is clean and smooth and everything is nice. When he restores the world, there's a process, a gradual process that makes it better again. So it's 3.5 years plus a month. Blessed and holy is the one who keeps waiting and attains to 1,335 days. 1,335 days is 44 and a half months. Again, God is going to have a period there of judgment. Jesus is going to be judging the nations. There's going to be a period of restoration. And it isn't automatic right away peace and justice and everything is nice and pretty and everything isn't green right away, right? Because everything was destroyed. So, again, it's not the end of the world, it's the end of the system of order, right? By the way, this is a pretty wild picture of a big asteroid hitting. I don't know that it'll be that big, but it would knock every mountain around to where it didn't used to be. But as for you, go your way to the end, then you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. So, that's the end of the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel, along with Revelation, should be able to give us that understanding that God's got a plan. His plan is just. Wait for him, trust him, he's going to bring it to pass. The next time I speak to you, maybe, I don't know if I'm going to live that long. We don't know, I'm getting old. But I'd like to speak about salvation. I want to talk about the subject I want to do next time is what does it mean to be born again? All right? And any questions or any comments about the book of Daniel? Okay, Kurt.